The Valuation of Black Identity in Schools. KIRIKU Drawing. The Valorization of Black Identity in Schools. Appreciation of self in any color and race. Expanded thinking. Like and share. Welcome to this channel. You are in Alpha Omega Creativa. I wish you learning and extraordinary experiences. Article recorded on March 25, 2023 by Sybil Baylor for educational sharing on Alpha Omega Creativa. Like and share. Federal University of Minas Gerais. Center for Human Rights and LGBT Citizenship. Lato Sensu Graduate Program Specialization in Gender and Diversity in School. B. Santos Dupram. The Valuation of Black Identity in Schools. KIRIKU Drawing. Belo Horizon 2016. I dedicate this work to my family, mainly to my dear son Heitor, for encouragement and affection received. First, I would like to thank God for the opportunity given to me, and to everyone who, in some way, contributed to this construction. Welcome to this channel. You are in Floor D, so you are Malik New House. I wish you learning and extraordinary experiences. Article recorded on March 25, 2023 by Sybil Baylor for educational sharing on Alpha Omega Creativa. It is not part of human nature, the perversity of racism. We are not racists. We become racists as well as we can stop being racist. Quote from P. Freire. Summary. The objective of this work was to raise awareness of the real need to value the Black identity within schools, seeking to combat racism and improving relationship between everyone. To make this task viable, the theoretical research was carried out, based on literary materials, secondary sources of literature and supplementary materials, and an empirical research, whose data were collected through informal conversations made with the 24 students of the third year, from class 313 of the municipal school Heitor Cláudio D. Sales. These data were recorded in a field diary with notes of statements, attitudes, postures and other actions of the same that were being observed. During the process where the following intervention activities were developed. Informal conversation circle about the history of the arrival of the Black population that was cruelly removed from Africa to be enslaved in Brazil during a long period of slavery until the date of abolition. Session cinema with the drawing. KIRIKU and the Witch, a beautiful drawing shrouded in mystery that highlights KIRIKU's intelligence and courage, and the reading of the book has trank us deep into the African tale that talks about the story of the little girl Bindu who dreamed of having her hair huge and with long braids, like her older sister. Besides, it was made posters in the classroom, telling the story of the Black population currently in society, how they live and what their work is like nowadays. Despite the short span of time we had to carry out these activities, we had good results, such as the students respecting each other more, everyone playing with everyone, without distinction, including even the noticeable reduction in the number of racist nicknames and jokes could be observed inside the classroom. Keywords: identity, valorization, racism. Summary. Introduction. Chapter 1. Discussing race. 13. 1.1 Race. 13. 1.2 Racism. 1.3 Identity. 16. 1.4 Black Culture. 17. Chapter 2. Discussing the school. 18. Chapter 3. Intervention activities. 22. 3.1 The data collection procedure. 22. 3.2 The promotion of activities. 25. Final considerations. 29. Bibliographic references. 31. Attachments. 33. Introduction. This work emphasizes the need to value Black identity in schools, seeking to combat racism and improving relationships between all. Despite being made up of several cultures and ethnic groups, Brazil has its history built from the exclusion of a large portion of the population, the imposition of a white domination. As described by Silva 2008 in his dissertation, this segregation was made official by decrees such as Decree N.1.331 of February 17, 1854, created to prohibit blacks from accessing public schools. Clearly illegal and explicit imposition favor of racial discrimination. The first Brazilian constitution, in its 5th article, formalized the Catholic religion as the only one to be adopted in Brazil Empire, and Article 95 of that document stated that only those who were Catholic could hold an elective position, falling to black population denied their faith and religion. There was also, in that same Magna Carta, the establishment of the census vote, which qualified the political rights of the citizen according to with their income, so that only active citizens voters and eligible were considered who had an annual income of more than 200 mil reais and who were born free, ruling out black women and men in decision-making, since they were slaves or freed and their earnings were very limited, below the pre-established income. For some scholars, there was an incentive to the process of whitening the Brazil, seeking to increase the number of whites in the country to the detriment of the black population, favoring the entry of European immigrants from the mid-19th century to work in agriculture, even had their tickets paid by the state itself, which was ardently defended by many intellectuals of the time as a way to reduce the mestizo population, the result of miscegenation between whites and blacks. These and many others measures ended up creating invisible walls that restricted the exercise of black citizenship and were legitimizing racism, while legitimizing discrimination. Silva, 2008. Despite agreeing with Silva 2008, it is known that, sometimes, the walls restricting the citizenship of black women and men are not so invisible, they can be explicitly observed. The reason for choosing this theme was to perceive the reality presented in the classes, where with a more critical look, it is clearly perceived how the students whites feel superior to black students, which is easily understandable if taking into account that, from an early age, they are privileged in schools and, therefore, they are fully aware of the existing racial difference. In addition, racism it also happens in the subtleties of teachers' actions and expressions. These happenings are very harmful and can even cause a distance between the two, making it difficult increasingly the possibility of reversing this racist scenario within schools. The objective of this work is to identify and analyze positive actions within the class, which reinforce the importance of building the black identity as a way of changing of racial inequalities occurring within schools. Believing that, through valuing blackness, it is possible to remedy this societal malaise, where even today there is a big difference in how the white population and the black population are treated. It is the latter continues, at times, left behind in her rights and humiliated by her color. Also, and no less important, alongside the appreciation of blackness is how specific objectives to reflect on black culture, emphasizing its importance for having contributed a lot to our culture, as in the case of handicrafts, cuisine, religiosity, and also dances such as capoeira, and value black women and men, relating his images to those of important black people in history. These joint actions can contribute to the valorization of the black identity because, before any other thing, it is necessary to make black men and women feel welcomed, holders of their own story, so that, feeling at ease, you can affirm your blackness. And this only will happen at the exact moment then they perceive themselves to be valued, being an integral part of the culture and society to which it belongs. Brazilian society. The effective participation of the school in affirming the black identity of children and young people, because it is one of the most important places for these people, exactly because it is there that they spend most of their time during childhood and youth, and also because it is the formal institution designated for the transfer of the legacy cultural. To meet the objectives proposed in this work, the theoretical research was carried out, based on literary materials, secondary sources of literature and supplementary materials, who supported the development of this work on valuing black identity in schools, and having offered elements for the formulation of the research. We consolidated our search by through reflections, which served as a guide for analysis and interpretation of data from the empirical field, which were collected through conversations with students. The data were recorded in a field diary with notes of speeches, attitudes, postures and other their actions that were observed during the process. In addition, there was collection of materials from all the productions carried out by the students, in intervention activities that were triggered during the application of this research, namely, informal conversation wheel about the history of the arrival of the black population, which was cruelly removed from Africa to be enslaved in Brazil, for long period of slavery, until the date of abolition. On that occasion, it was reported how black women and men blacks started to live later, without money and without work, just being free, in addition to addressing some important black figures in history. Movie session with the drawing KIRIKU and the Sorceress, a beautiful drawing wrapped in mystery that highlights the intelligence and courage of KIRIKU, a very young black boy. Clever. Reading of the book has trank us deep into an African tale that talks about the history of the little girl Binda, with her dream of having her hair huge and with long braids like her older sister, but she learned that even if her hair was short, could be decorated and look very nice. And as homework, the class should look for different materials, such as magazines and newspapers that showed black men and women and that told their stories, the way they live and how their work is these days. In possession of the data, they were interpreted via critical analysis on the possible behavior changes occurred in children. From now on, the theoretical references that contributed to the elaboration of the work in valorization of the black identity in the schools. In Chapter 1, we will examine the concepts of race, also turning our gaze to racism. In the Chapter 2, we will do a study on the school, as the formal institution designated for the transfer of the cultural legacy of the peoples. Although, on several occasions, she reproduced inequalities. And in Chapter 3, we will visualize the data collection process and the promotion of intervention activities. 1. Race discussion. 1.1 Race. According to Holmes 2003, races are social, political and cultural constructions produced in the social and power relations created throughout the historical period, and with the aim of consequence, the formation of inequality in the course of the process. So, there is a hierarchization, which takes place from the correlation of forces of different identities, in which some are conventionally taken as superior. Historically, the white race has been having privileges, considered to be superior to the black race. In this way, it becomes essential, when dealing with the black race, to oppose and question what is set, delegitimize the idea of a natural inferiority of certain races. Also historicize this discussion, since hierarchization is the result of historical processes and not something in essence. Race is a political category. It is on the basis of it that we can speak of inequality and not naturalization. According to Munanga 2005, the meaning of race is also socio-cultural, historical, and psychological. Also according to the author, the content of race is morphobiological and that of ethnicity is socio-cultural, historical and psychological. The population set called white, black and yellow race. It can contain in its bosom diverse ethnicities. An ethnic group is a group of individuals who, historically or mythologically, they have a common ancestor, have a common language, the same religion or cosmovision, the same culture and live geographically in the same territory. Munanga 2003. While Nito 2007 leads us to understand that most researchers Brazilians who work in the areas of racial and interethnic relations often resort to term race to explain racism, because this phenomenon is still based on the existence of hierarchical races. According to Silva MISKOLCIA Pub Silva, 2014, p. 117, the school failure of black children results from their school trajectory, related to the process subordination of one of the marks that constitute them, race. In fact, here in Brazil, whenever the term race is used colloquially, it is being directly related to the pejorative image with which the black person is often associated. Paraphrasing Holmes 2011, we live in a country where someone's skin color is determining factor to be disqualified in society. His character is not observed, his conduct, its history. The racial gulf does indeed exist between whites and blacks in our country, because it is interspersed with other attributes that disqualify the black person. Because there is a question of power and hierarchization of difference, where the white race maintains its privileges, without allowing the black race to ever cease to be considered inferior, to have the same privileges and the same rights. And, by considering race as a political category, we managed to arrive at the racism, the next concept to be studied. We know that we need to dedicate ourselves to the task of better understand it, in order to promote practices and ways of coping with it. 1.2 Racism. Racism is a recurrent problem in Brazilian society, representing the system of oppression of marginalized difference, oppression against ethnic racial groups possessing physical and cultural characteristics that did not match the model hegemonic. That is, they do not correspond to the characteristics of dominant groups. These characteristics are evaluated by means of signs such as skin color, hair type, shape of nose. On the one hand, racism is a behavior, an action resulting from aversion, or even hatred towards people simply because they belong to a racial group different from the other. And it's not just because of the difference, but because there is a disqualification of what distances itself from the attributes that were chosen as the default. In this way, any person or social group that has cultural, linguistic and religious traits different from those standardized, chosen as superiors. And that is why it is necessary to talk more about racism in order to demystify it, because, according to the thought of Gomez 2014, the more you deny it, the more the racism will deepen. And the author goes further, when together with anti-Abrahamics, ABRAMOWICs and homos. 2010, the two authors highlight the fundamental posture of the school fight against racism, when they write how important it is. Schools work with content that can contribute to black students being contemplated. The authors also point out the textbooks are pointed out in racial research as being the vehicle that can generate negative consequences in the self-image of the black child, because of the propagation of stereotypes related to the people black, where generally they are presented as subordinates or in a caricatured. This means that, when using the textbook in their classroom, the teacher needs to do in a critical way, so that it serves as an auxiliary instrument in the positive image of these children and not the opposite. Paulo Freire 2001 p. 68 highlights that it is not part of the nature of the human being to perversity of racism. We are not racist. We become racist as soon as we can stop being racist. Because it is a social construction. Not being racist or ceasing to be racist are measures that can be envisioned, since we conceive racism as a social construction. But it is not a simple process, without clashes and wear and tears. But in the school context, curricula can serve as a positive tool for image of black people and problematization of diversity. At this point, we will refer to the article by Valverde and Stocco 2009, p. 153 exactly to the following passage, where the phrase "the observation of affectivity and physical contact identified between black and white children," demonstrating that discrimination it is not something intrinsic, but is built throughout the socialization process. Soon, we can see that children are not essentially racist, they learn to be. And, therefore, the child or anyone else may want to stop being racist, even though not be an easy task, because some groups will have to give up their privileges and that will inevitably cause conflict. And schools can help in this task, especially when they provide a favorable environment for these changes to occur, adapting your curriculum in order to favor this initiative over time. Because nobody waits for miracles, we have awareness that the path to end racism will take time, demands efforts, reflections and clashes. We know that to stop being racist is not such a simple task. The process is conflict, implies loss of privileges, implies a lot of struggle. No one stops being racist night to day. There are centuries of stigmatization of the figure of black men and women, There are centuries in which this process has been dragging on, and this issue of image has been accompanied by a series of things, with poverty and marginalization. And all this makes it necessary that the schools start this process as soon as possible. Next, we will talk about another very important topic, which is the understanding of which is the identity and the importance of affirming the Black identity in schools, showing the importance of keeping the flame of Black pride lit among all children and young people Afro-descendants. 1.3 Identity. According to Wagner Aparecido Silva in his dissertation work 2008, can be perceived as being the peculiarity or attribute of each one, and also what the identifies with ethnic, racial, social class and gender groups, among others. The identity, it is a construction of the person himself, but not of the isolated individual, as it happens in conviviality with others, making them your point of departure or reference. For as the question of race, identity is also a political category, and it is not done without conflicts. Silva, 2008. For Silva 2014. In the first approximation, it seems to be easy to define identity. Identity is simply what one is. I am Brazilian, I am Black, I am heterosexual, I am young, I am a man. Silva, 2014, p. 74. But still, according to Silva, it is built from the other, from the differences that are perceived. In addition to being interdependent, identity and difference share an important characteristic. They are the result of acts of linguistic creation, means to say that they are created through acts of language. Silva, 2014, p. 76. Identity can be understood as the awareness that each one has of himself, the which social class he belongs to, and the racial group he represents. It is a continuous production that is being built throughout life. According to the thinking of Gomes 2003, Black identity is understood as a social, historical and cultural construction, implying the view that the subject has of himself and the group to which he belongs, based on the relationship established with others. And about this one subject, the author, in another word Gomes, 2008, p. 20, points out that the construction of Black identity is a movement that does not just start from the look from within, from the old Black about himself and his body, but also as the gaze of the others, of what is out. It is worth noting here that Black identity is understood as a historical construction, cultural, and plural. And, according to the statement made by Professor Yananga, the identity broader Black would be the political identity of an important segment of the population. Brazilian society excluded from its political and economic participation and from the full exercise of citizenship. MUNNANGA, 2012, p. 16. The importance that the construction of a positive Black identity has is to be a path to the conquest of full citizenship for people of African descent. In a society like ours, where only a certain ethnic racial group is valued, since school time, it is not a complicated task to be white. The problem is that the same hit happens with other social groups such as indigenous people, Asians and people of African descent. That is why it is not easy to assume and establish a Black identity in our country, even if dealing with a country where almost half of the population is Black, because Black women and men continue to be seen in an inferior or marginalized way. According to Gomez 2003, it is very difficult to build a positive black identity in a society that imposes the black population the need to deny their color. Therefore, it would not be possible to think of carry out actions aimed at combating racism without first thinking about actions that start inside classrooms, affirming black identity among children. At this point, we will talk about culture below, as well as the importance of black culture in our society. 1 point for black culture. In his book, GERTSKLUKHOHNA 2008 brings the definition of culture as the global way of life of a people or the social legacy that the individual acquires from your group. P.4. That is, culture can be understood as the customs and values of a society, while Gomez 2003 P.77 states that black culture can be understood as a particularity of culture that has been historically constructed by an ethnic/racial group specific, but never in isolation, but through contact with other groups and peoples. It is also important to remember, according to the dissertation by Valeria Aparecida Algarve 2004, that Brazilian cultural manifestations permeate all manifestations African, from the way of life, work, religion, its parties, manifestations of thoughts. Everything is part of black cultural manifestations. And this whole culture is made present in the way of life of the majority of the Brazilian people, although it is predominant among the black segment of the population, for being descended from Africans who were enslaved in the Brazil. Furthermore, according to Gomez, black culture enables black people to build a we of history and of an identity. It concerns cultural awareness, aesthetics, corporeality, musicality, religiosity, the experience of blackness, marked by a process of Africanity and cultural recreation. This enables the positioning of the black before the other and highlights relevant aspects of their history and ancestry. Gomez 2003 P.79 Studying black culture at school must be seen as a way found to help black students to raise their self-esteem, as they know they do part of a whole, and being recognized as an integral part of society. Our schools cannot continue to feed and reproduce inequalities. All children and young people blacks need to build or recover their positive identity, accepting themselves exactly as they are, and feeling proud of the traditions present in their culture. According to the theme chosen, valuing black identity in schools emerged as a need to improve the school and racism. Well, even though it's a space intended for the integration and formation of children, since a long time ago, the school has been reproducing inequalities, including racism. There are several studies dedicated to this problem, just as there are many researchers who are dedicated to seeking answers and possible solutions to put an end to this problem, and make the school a space where really everyone is the same. 2. School discussion. As previously mentioned, there are several studies and research on the theme the school and the racism, in which the authors seek to deepen more on the subject, clarifying doubts and looking for alternatives to help in their fight. The studies cited here were carefully chosen, for allowing us to know the ways in which, frequently, the racism has been appearing in the school environment. Racism has prevailed over the years, even being perceived even in pedagogical publications, such as in books and magazines. where white children are portrayed as being healthy and happy, while black children have, for the most part, their image associated with malnutrition. Street children, family abandonment. Gomos, 2010, p. 104. Adding to this, even today, there is an almost cultural predilection among the vast majority of teachers by light-skinned students. Therefore, it becomes quite difficult to think of measures that change this reality in our country, without first turning our attention to the space of education, from an early age school. Nothing fairer than being able to count on the support of school institutions to break the racial chasm right in the early years of education, cultivating good habits, such as to positively integrate black culture into our society, making the necessary adaptations in the curricula, and including them once and for all. After all, because the school is a space where children and young people spend most of their lives, it is very important that it be a pleasant place to be, a space really intended for socialization. Thus, we will really be able to count on a better education capable of offering children the opportunity to become better, empowered and aware citizens, that people are not and do not need to be equal, but everyone deserves to have equal rights. Racism has always been present in the school space. It can even be said that he already is part of the scenario of Brazilian education. As we studied early on in our course Gender and Diversity at School, inequality was historically constructed, and the schools participated in the process of standardization of human trajectories, based on the transmission of the culture of hegemonic values. Since this hegemonic character, where the white race is privileged to the detriment of the black race, is still in force today in society Brazilian, denying this issue ends up causing more racial inequalities in the environment school. The writer Dale 1996 states that, "We believe that the school can and should be a broad training space for the student, which deepens their humanization process, enhancing the dimensions and abilities that make each of us human beings." Page 26. But for this to happen, firstly, the Brazilian school has the challenge of reviewing its postures, values and curricular knowledge. In fact, social movements have been fighting a lot, over time, so that this change takes place. And, according to the studies carried out in the first unit of the GBE, there were several struggles led by them to get actions to be developed and that could lead to changes in the reality of racism. There are many achievements significant in the course of the fight against racism. According to Gomes 2006, p. 36, at the beginning of the third millennium the black movement started to adopt a more propositional posture, carrying out systematic interventions inside of the states and, consequently, achieved advances such as the creation of the Secretariat of Policies of the Promotion of Racial Equality SEPPIR. This secretariat is responsible for various actions focused on racial equality. It covers the entire national area in partnership with ministries, state and municipal departments, universities, other social movements and NGOs. And it is responsible for several actions aimed at racial equality. We're also the Secretariat for Continuing Education, Literacy, Diversity and Inclusion was built SECADI, the Educational Diversity and Inclusion Coordination that organizes conferences and produces didactic material related to the theme. The long way was traveled until, finally, racial issues began to be taken over by the state and schools with the force of Law 10.639/031. Page note: 1 Law 10,639 of January 9, 2003 includes in the curriculum of primary and secondary education establishments, official and private, the mandatory teaching of Afro-Brazilian history and culture, and determines that the syllabus will include the study of the history of Africa and Africans, the struggle of blacks in Brazil, Brazilian black culture and the black in the formation of national society, rescuing the contribution of black people in the social, economic and political areas relevant to the history of Brazil, in addition to establishing, in the school calendar, the November 20th as a commemorative date of Black Consciousness Day. Adaptation available at http://www.plano2.gov.br. End of page note. Previous to this law, schools have always been concerned about racism. Yes. But from the point of view hegemonic, where the white student was seen as being superior to the black student, who on the other hand, he was always inferior. Thus, according to Gomes, 2010, the school needs to overcome the subordination of knowledge of black culture, the presence of racial stereotypes in textbooks, the stigmatization of black people because, as we see, it is still notable the difference in how black students are treated in relation to students whites in schools. One of the ways to avoid talking about racism is to try to make it invisible. No one wants to be considered or even considers the possibility of being seen as a prejudiced person. And this invisibility is also adopted in schools, as we can see check in articles that address this topic, as in the case of the article already cited above by Valverde and Stocco 2009, which points to a study by L. Valero 2005 carried out with early childhood education, which shows us the absence of the black population on posters, the omission of teachers in the face of situations of discrimination suffered by black children, the dehumanizing adjective practices of black children also on the part of teachers, and the more effective stimulus and treatment aimed at the white child. In this study, the invisibility of the black population in books is also highlighted. Didactic, or how their presence was dehumanized or exoticized, in cases where were directly linked to slavery. All this has always contributed to the image negative effect of black children being maximized. As a teacher for some years in the municipal elementary school network, I can't follow how racial issues are still being masked in our society, especially in the school environment. Still, racism can be observed in small attitudes or in acts on the part of the teaching staff who do not see themselves as racist, but who release jokes among peers about certain black students, and invariably refuses to give students the same opportunities regardless of their color or features physiques, as it continues to elect them according to previously defined criteria of beauty. For these teachers, it doesn't matter if the little black boy is the best in his class, in terms of learning achievement. When it comes time to choose a student highlight for the school, he will not hesitate to choose any other that fits the pre-established beauty phenotype as the standard. The author Marilita Pinto de Carvalho 2004 raises interesting notes from according to the result found after carrying out research. The initial focus of the research was questions about differences in school performance between the sexes, but inequality ratio imposed itself as an indispensable category for the analysis. According to the author, there are many differences within the group of racial inequalities, being necessary to characterize those who also have school problems. Among the biggest problems responsible for school failure, the data relating to the discrepancy between the grade taken and age, referring to the group of black students in male, showing that the majority of illiterate young people are black, who went through school and still could not take ownership of the reading and writing tools, because had a school trajectory marked by repetition and evasion. This indicates that the school is failing in front of a large group of young people, in which a majority of male persons, when considering the race variable. However, black women appear soon after as the next group to present the greatest problem in school performance. With regard to teachers, there is still, with relative frequency, that student date that would be part of some presentation at school, and that suddenly changes opinion when discovering that his date would be a black boy. In addition to constant jokes, which can be heard in the corridors of schools, the article Education and Racism, Knowing the Contradictions of the Past to Build the School of the Future, Oliveira, 2007, portrays a bit of racism in the educational field, where it sometimes presents itself in a camouflaged way. It is also present in other sectors of society, trying to pass as just part of the imagination of some individuals. Another form also commonly used in an attempt to avoid the subject. However, Silva 2006 talks about the great disadvantage of the black population in relation to white women and how it is common to attribute racial inequalities to the conditions of origin of the people, which would justify the low schooling of blacks, from the moment of abolition of slavery to the present day. In addition to these articles, it is worth highlighting the important contribution made by the book Overcoming Racism at School, prepared by 11 professors and specialists from education, and organized by Cabenjal Munanga, edited by the Ministry of Education Brazil, 1999. One of the proposals presented in this book is that education be able to offer everyone, youth and adults, regardless of their color, the possibility of question and deconstruct the myths of superiority of human beings, interjected in them by racist culture that everyone has been socialized into. The book Racial Relations at School, Reproduction of Inequalities in the Name of Equality, Castor and Abraham Soviet, 2006, seeks to show the interior of schools, where groups' positions on racial issues are learned and internalized from younger age, shaping behaviors and structuring ways of acting and thinking stigmatized, and coming to the conclusion that to change this practice a great social investment. After carrying out this research on schools and racism, the need to create intervention strategies, and, therefore, in the next chapter we will detail how the empirical research was carried out. And we'll also talk about the process of data collection done with the class, in addition to showing the activities of interventions that were made in the classroom to help in the positivization of black identity. 3. Intervention activities. 3.1 The data collection procedure. The empirical research was carried out at the school where I work as a teacher, the Escola Municipal Heitor Cláudio de Sales, in Pedro Leopoldo. and the period of duration was between the mid-October to early November of 2015, with 24 students from third year of class 313. They are lower class children, between 8 and 9 years old. Starting the process, the students were asked what color their skin was. Question was asked with the purpose of observing the way each child projects himself, how each sees itself in comparison to the other. Almost all children answered that they were white. Only 3 of them said they were brunettes and none said they were black, perhaps because of the fact that people do not identify with their color or with their race. Table 1. Self-declaration of skin color, made by the years of class 313, from Escola Municipal Heitor Cláudio details. Students' age, color or race: white and brown or brown. Date: Naos 19 white, 2 brown or brown. 9 years old. 2 white, 1 brown or brunette. Total equal 21 white, 3 brown or brown. Source: survey data, 2015. Next, they were asked if they had ever heard about Africa, and in case the answer being affirmative, we tried to find out what they had already heard about that continent. Given the responses obtained, most students had already heard about it. It was possible through critical analysis identify relationships about how children imagined the Africa, or if they had only heard about it through the media. Really, no student's imagination. There was only knowledge acquired through the means of communication, mainly the image usually portrayed by television, of being a continent extremely miserable, where the majority of the population is black. Also, a little history was told of how the Africans were removed from strength of their place of origin, to be enslaved in other countries, like here in Brazil. There was space to highlight the great contribution of African religiosity, cuisine, of the beauty of the African fauna, among other important contributions. At first, because of poverty information they had due to the information portrayed being only those exploited by the media, it was difficult for children to imagine the beauty of Africa. An example of this was the astonished reaction they had when they learned that Africa was very rich in beauty and that its fauna is also very rich. The children found it difficult to imagine how beautiful the continent where there was so much poverty could be. Asked to repeat the explanation again, and then they asked, "What do you mean, teacher? As a place where people are so poor, can it be so beautiful?" Taking advantage of this point, we clarified that, for the media, it may not be interesting to talk about the qualities of a country and that aiming at profit. For example, newspapers and magazines can only highlight the negative side of a fact, like poverty. That this is a commonly adopted practice, and that even many foreigners have no idea of our reaches. When they hear about Brazil, they only hear about drug trafficking, robberies and misery. And from time to time, they hear about some news about carnival and football. At that moment, the life of Zumbi dos Palmares was narrated, signaling to be a very interesting story, because the hero was black, and a black hero is not something common. Zumbi lived at that time when blacks were enslaved. However, he opposed, ran away, and he fought hard to help his friends too. As the story was told, at the same time, It was observed whether all the children perceived him as a hero or great warrior, or if only black children would perceive him that way, because he also be black. But all the students seemed to like it a lot. In part because the children that age are still very fond of hero stories, and also because the children they said he was smart and cool because he didn't let himself down and fought to help your people leave the condition of enslavement to conquer freedom. Opportunely, other important black figures were highlighted, such as King Pelé and the current President of the United States, Barack Obama. How was said previously, these people were chosen because they are part of the story and because they are famous personalities of the world stage. There was great acceptance of these figures by part of the students, acting directly in a positive way and leading black students to identify with them, making them reflect that it is possible for anyone, regardless of the color of your skin, achieved a prominent position in your work, including, some boys said they will be soccer players and girls said they want to be ballerinas or models. Highlighting the issue of racial inequalities, the situation of blacks in the Brazil, where he is seen as inferior and does not have the same opportunities as whites, living in a situation of poverty, unemployment. Black children and young people abandon schools much earlier than white children and young people. Furthermore, still a large part one of them, he starts working very young to help at home, to contribute with the income familiar. With the help of clippings from newspapers and magazines, it was clearly possible to perceive a difference between the lives of whites and blacks. And, when realizing the proportion of the size of this inequality, the children were amazed because they were not aware of this reality. Finally, the issue of prejudice and racial discrimination was addressed, noting the absurd to judge the person just because of their color, noting that all races are different and deserving of respect and of being assured the same rights. What truly all of us are different from others, and no one is like anyone else. And that the standardized beauty is a value of cultural nature, which may vary from culture to culture. For example, the current standard of female beauty is a very thin woman, but even a very thin one. Not so long ago, beautiful women were curvy women. When the subject was exhausted, the first question was resumed, but this time again way. And now, after everything we've learned, how would you define your color? In this time, the students seemed to have understood that there would be no problem in assuming their color, because in front of their colleagues, two students proudly assumed that they were black. After the detailed analysis of the data collection, some practices were chosen of intervention that could help in the positive black identity of the students. 3.2 The promotion of activities according to the result obtained in the data collection, were chosen some activities to serve as a reflection in the process of construction of the identity black woman positivized within the school, so that students could perceive black beauty and that feel proud of their color. First, the class watched KIRIKU and the Witch, a cartoon wrapped in magic. However, before starting the cinema session, it was explained to the students that the drawing had been chosen because it was a story that valued African culture, where the central character was a very smart black boy. Also emphasizing the fact that it was good to watch a movie where the hero is black, because as we said earlier, it is not a matter of something common. While everyone watched the film, The reaction of each one of the participants was observed. Students checking whether or not they would approve the design. And when they finished watching, being asked whether or not they liked the design, they said they thought it was good funny. Opportunely, the students were asked to point out the passage they considered to be most important in drawing. The answers were the most varied. However, many of them they liked the part where KIRIKU was talking to her mother, still inside her belly. Others, they said they found the moment of birth amusing, because he was born and already walked away and saying what he should be called. For when he hid inside his uncle's hat, causing the sorceress to believe that the hat was magical. Besides the part where KIRIKU saves her friends by piercing the sorceress's magic canoe, thus preventing them from taking it at the source. Some students preferred the passage where the protagonist went to talk with a wise old man from the village, trying to figure out how to fight the sorceress. When the discussion on what they found most interesting was closed in the drawing, the students went down to the schoolyard to, together, make a drawing about the movie. During the performance of this activity, it can be noticed that all the children participated with great enthusiasm. Back in the classroom, it was also explained to the class that it is common to African people value their traditions a lot, such as those that were presented in the drawing. Music that the tribe dances together, wearing masks and having their bodies painted. Furthermore, the most old people are highly respected, as they are considered wise. At this moment, the question asked to the students was, if they had the habit of listening and respect older people. Approximately half of the class said they obeyed to the elders. They even cited as an example the advice they received from their grandparents. But the other part of the class replied that they only cared about the teachings received from their parents. So, it was necessary to explain to them that the teachings of the fathers are very important. However, all older people have a lot to teach us, and are able to give us real-life lessons. Then, everyone was asked to remember the moment when KIRIKU discovered the sorceress's secret. Well, that way, they would see that the person with whom he went for advice, it was precisely the wise old man of the tribe. One of the boys, who had been listening attentively, made the following comment. I might not have been able to do it without the help of the elder, or alone. KIRIKU would take years to be able to defeat the sorceress, replied a little girl. Soon the children began to narrate cases where they could perceive that, just like was shown in KIRIKU and the sorceress, we must always respect the wisdom of the most elderly. The boy said that he got rid of hurting his foot riding the bicycle, simply because, listening to his grandparents' advice, he decided to put on his sneakers. His girl was lucky when her grandmother did not let her go out with her friends, because the car that would take ended up breaking down halfway. Then they were asked to explain why they chose colored crayons brown to represent the skin color of KIRIKU and the sorceress in the drawing they made. Everyone's response, practically, came at the same time, because they were black. Teacher, it was passed on that the observation they made was correct, as indeed the characters were black. But then, why didn't they choose black-colored crayons? At that time, there was silence. The children looked at each other and only one girl had the courage to answer for the class. "It is not impolite to call others black or black, teacher." And she continued, "If I painted them black, wouldn't that be racism?" In that moment, it was explained that there is no problem in portraying people as they are, as long as there is respect. In cartoons, as in real life, people are different. There are tall people and short people, white people and black people, new people and older people, and they can be portrayed as they are, so clearly show the diversity of people in the world. There is no one color better than another. The prejudice is not in skin color, but in the minds of some people who consider color/race superior to another. The following day, the reading of the book Bintu's Brave was carried out. Right after having explained to the children that the narrative was a very beautiful story, where the main character, as in the Kiriku cartoon, was a black person, this time, it was a black girl, whose name was Bintu. This girl had curly and short hair, but she didn't like it, because she dreamed of having long braids adorned with colored stones and seashells. The story isn't real, but even today, many kids don't like their hair for being curly. This book was chosen due to its exposition of the strong presence of black beauty, richly portrayed in its pages. So easily can be used as identification font for the black children in the class to realize, for example, that curly hair is also beautiful, and should be a source of pride for them. And the other students would also be contemplated, as they observe that being smooth is not a sufficient criterion for a hair is considered beautiful. During the discussion about the book, they were asked what they thought of the reading. The answer was unanimous. All the students had enjoyed hearing the story. And when asked that they had understood about him, one of the girls explained the whole plot of the book by saying that once upon a time there was a little black girl named Bintu who wanted to have long braids, but her hair was very curly and short. Then, one day, she had to save two of her friends, because they were drowning. That's when her grandmother got happy, and gave her a little bit of ornaments in the form of little fish, for her to decorate her hair. Then she realized that her hair was beautiful, just like that, and she was very happy. So the girls started talking to each other about their hair, especially those whose hair was frizzy or curly, saying they liked their hair as they were. One of them said that her mother always helped her when it was time to wash her hair, because it was very difficult, because it was very bulky and big. She also said that only washed with shampoo and put on a cream at the end, her hair dried by itself in the wind, but only after his mother put some curls on it, producing a very beautiful effect. Another student said that she had huge hair before she cut it. She had to cut it, as it was very difficult to take care of it. Even combing it was a sacrifice. Was when her mother decided to take her to the salon to cut and straighten her hair. Since then, it's just like that she prefers to wear her hair straight and flat, because she thinks it looks much prettier. At this point, a third girl said that although some boys and girls laughed when she walks by, pointing to her huge curly hair, now she doesn't care anymore, because she got used to the little jokes. But when she was younger, she cried a lot and was sad. Taking the opportunity, We talked about how beautiful and well everyone's hair was. Care. Some of the hair was straight, but most was really curly. So, the children began to tell about the hair of neighbors, or even acquaintances, who had the most beautiful curly hair they had ever seen. As homework, the children were asked to bring newspaper clippings and magazines, to in groups, make posters for the celebration of Black consciousness, showing Black people at school, at work, in different situations. This was a very good job. Despite children of this age, between 8 and 9 years, disperse easily and some find it difficult to work in group, it was very helpful. They took to the classroom several photos and reports talking about the lives of Black people, their jobs, housing and their daily difficulties. They did everything in groups, and those who had more difficulty were helped by the others. The moment they finished, the students split up to post the posters through the walls of the school. In this way, they were able to share a little of what they learned about a role that Blacks have been occupying in society. They represented, through posters, the need to end the absurd segregation still experienced today between whites and Blacks. Carrying out these activities was very important for the process of children's awareness of the reality experienced by Blacks in society. So, were able to realize that they can also help transform this reality. After all, it is I need to start the fight against racism within schools. The conclusions we were able to reach after carrying out that job. Final considerations. This research brought important reflections on racial relations and the valorization of Black identity in schools. In addition to having brought up pedagogical strategies, which put into practice forms of coping with racism in the school environment. Therefore, the theoretical framework was based in a way that clarifies possible doubts that arose about the concepts of race, identity, racism and Black culture, and that a study was elaborated on them. In addition, during the course of the research, we were faced with the need to dedicate ourselves to understand more about school, as it is a fundamental part of the job. In this moment, we began to study how the process of racism has been reproduced, over time, within schools, as if it were a part of their teachings. Therefore, schools have a very important role in the fight against prejudice and in appreciation of the Black race of its students. The theoretical deepening was essential, so that the pedagogical actions carried out during the application of the research at school act fundamentally in the struggle against racism. The research carried out showed how the school has come along the years, keeping reproducer of inequalities, supporting the hegemonic character and perpetuating the treatment distinction that it provides to its students. Of all that was studied, the highlight, without a doubt, was the relations existing between schools and racism. By reproducing differences and inequalities, dividing students in groups. Among such groups, only a few students deserve treatment differentiated, as they fit the normative standards chosen by society. Precisely the school, which needs to be a welcoming space for differences and which needs to teach its students to respect diversity. The intervention activities carried out showed that children bring within themselves concepts learned at home and culturally about races. However, with goodwill and elaborated practices, we can value Black children, showing how Black skin and Black features are as beautiful as white skin and white features, or lighter skin. that no one is born racist. We need to remember that. Thus, it is also necessary that schools want to change their ways of acting, no longer reproducing differences, and truly treating everyone equally. However, we know that the process to end racism is long, time-consuming and laborious, demanding goodwill and behavior changes. In addition to inevitable losses of advantages for the group considered as the dominant one. Unfortunately, time was too short, and intervention activities began only in mid-October. Therefore, we were unable to carry out all the activities that initially proposed. It was necessary to make adaptations to the activities, taking care to worry only with what would really be relevant. How to show stories that are not part of our everyday life, where the main characters are black. Therefore, it was decided that we would work with KIRIKU's drawing, with the book Bintu's Briggs, and with the production of posters that showed the daily life of the black population, as they were activities that could make a significant contribution to the lives of children. Although we have just started the work of valuing black identity within from the school, we had good results, such as students respecting each other more, everyone playing with everyone without distinction. A noticeable reduction in the number of racist nicknames and jokes inside and outside the classroom. No greater difficulty was found during the performance of activities in the classroom. Although children already bring concepts and prejudices from home, they are very smart, and when they realize what their teacher's posture is, they begin to mirror themselves in the behavior. The biggest impasse found was the accumulation of projects that we, professors, are doomed during the school year. So, when this intervention project was presented to the direction, there was not much appreciation. After all, other projects were already underway prioritized by the institution, such as the financial education project, the environment and sustainability, in addition to the PGA or advanced management program. It is noticed that, despite being included in the curriculum, the school has not been concerned truly in working with diversity on a daily basis. Meanwhile, the issue of race remains restricted to a single civic commemoration, the Day of Black Consciousness. Thus, we conclude that a possibility found to continue this work to combat racism, whether to maintain the use of different materials in the classroom, such as films and books, which can contribute in a forceful way, providing opportunities for reflections and critical questions to students about the importance of making black identity positive, as a way of modifying the reality experienced by the black population in society. Bibliographic references: Abramovich, contain, Gomez, Molino. Education and Race, Political Perspectives, Pedagogical, and Aesthetics. Belo Horizonte, Authentic, 2010. Golgarda, Valeria Aparecida. Dissertation: Black Culture in the Classroom. Canto de Africanidades raise the self-esteem of black children and improve relationships between black and white children. Available in 2004. Brandao, André Augusto Pereira. Education program about blacks in society, Brazilian. Material provided by the GDE course at UFMG. Belo Horizonte, 2014. Carvalho, Marilina Pinto D. The School Failure of Boys and Girls, Articulations between Gender and Color / Race. CAD Paid Campinas, number June 22, 2004. Castro, Mary Garcia, ABRAM OVA, Miriam Coward. Race Relations at School. Reproduction of Inequality in the Name of Equality. Available in 2006. DAYRELL. Juarez Tarcisio 1996. The School as a Socio-Cultural Space. In J.Darrell.org. Multiple Perspectives on Education and Culture, page 136161. Belo Horizonte. Publisher UFMG. DIO UF. Sylvian Habintus Briggs. Publisher Kozak Naices. 2007. Freire, Paul. Pedagogy of Hope. The Reunion with the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. 11th ed. Rio de Janeiro. Peace and Land. 2001. Guilherme Clifford. The Interpretation of Cultures. Rio de Janeiro. LTC Editora. 2008. Gomes, Nilmalino. Some terms and concepts present in the debate on relationships races in Brazil. A brief discussion. Material provided by the GDE course at UFMG. Belo Horizonte, 2014. Gomes, Nilmalino. Article Black Culture and Education. Available in Gomes, Nilmalino. Questions about Curriculum, Diversity and Curriculum. Brasilia, Ministry of Education. Secretariat of Basic Education. 2006. Gomes, Nilmalino. Article Education, Ethnic Racial Relations and Law 10.639/03. Available at August 25, 2011. Gomes, Nilmalino. A Look Beyond Borders. Education and Race Relations. First ed. Belo Horizonte. Authentic. 2010. Gomes, Nilmalino. Without Losing the Root. Body and Hair as Symbols of Identity. Black. Second ed. Belo Horizonte. Authentica. 2008. Machado, Frederico Viana. State, Social Movements and Human Rights. Material made available by the UFMG GDE. Belo Horizonte, 2014. MISKOLCI. Richard. Marks of Difference in School Teaching. First ed. San Carlos, Edufscard, 2014. MUNANGA. Cabengel. Negritude, Uses and Meanings. Third ed. Belo Horizonte. Authentic. 2009. MUNANGA. Cabengel.org. Overcoming Racism at School. Available in 2005. MUNANGA. Cabengel. A conceptual approach to the notions of race, racism, identity and ethnicity. Available at 2003. Nito, Paul. Article Racism in Kardec. Anti-Spiritist Propaganda and the Truth Doctrinal. Available in 2007. Ocelot, Michelle. Direction. Kiriku and the Sorceress. Available in http://www.youtube.com/watch?D=summit P7 Uxticket greater than 1998. Oliveira, Jose Reynaldo. Education and Racism. Knowing the Contradictions of the Past to Build the School of the Future. Available in 2007. Silva, Andrew Nethomius Noshrilodier. Dissertation reflecting Black identity and acting multiculturally in teaching. Available in 2008. Silva, Paulo Vinicius Baptista. 2006. Education and Racial Inequalities in Brazil. Silva, Mastado. Identity and Difference. 14th ed. Petrópolis. Voices. 2000. Silva, Wagner Aparecido. Dissertation VVREI. Viva Reinhold. Vida also yours, Captain. Available at Valverde, Daniel Oliveira, Stocco, Laura. 2009. Notes for the Interpretation of Racial Inequalities in Education. Attachments. Annex A. Children drawing the movie KIRIKU. Annex B. Panel drawing KIRIKU and the Sorceress. Annex C. Activity on Black culture. Annex D. Activity on racial prejudice. Attachment Island. Typical dishes of African origin. Annex F. Researching African foods. Annex G. Black poster. Annex H. Illustration of a student representing the freedom of Black people. Annex I. Poster about racial differences. Annex J. Study on Black consciousness. Annex K. Poster on Black consciousness. End of article reading. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good night.